Thank you very much, AAK, for this opportunity for the interview. My name is Engineer Maurice Akech. I am the Executive Director of National Construction Authority. This is an institution which is a regulator for the construction industry in Kenya. National Construction Authority has an overall mandate which is to oversee the construction industry and coordinate its development. But if I break it down so that at least it's clear and we know what we do, so that anybody looking for those services can always know where to get them, we do three key things. One is regulatory, the second one is capacity building, and the third one is advisory. Under regulatory mandate, our role is to register contractors. So any contractor undertaking any construction business in this country must get license from National Construction Authority, whether they are locally incorporated companies as local contractors or indigenous contractors, or whether they are contractors coming from outside Kenya. For them to do construction project, they must have a license from the National Construction Authority. And of course, because of different sizes in terms of capacity of those contractors, we categorize them into the high caliber contractor, which is NCA1, to the smallest contractor, which is NCA8. So the rest fall in between. They also classified into whether they're doing roadworks, waterworks, building works, mechanical works, electrical works. So all that is a class of a work that can be registered under NCA in a certain category. So category is the size in terms of capacity, class is the specifics of the work to be done. And we register all types of contractors, whether they are whichever kind of project they're doing, as long as it's a construction project. The other regulatory mandate is basically accreditation of construction workers. These are those who are mostly employed by contractors. So here I'm talking about skilled construction workers in various trades and construction site supervisors. Accreditation here means that if, for instance, you're a plumber, or you're an electrician, or you're a mason, or any other trade you may think about, if now you have done work out there, you've gone through some training, and you've reached some sufficient level of skill, you come to National Construction Authority, or actually go online and apply for accreditation. We'll accredit you and we'll give you an accreditation card for the trade area you've registered in. So we urge consumers of these services, either contractors or developers, so that when you're engaging a construction worker, ensure that you engage one that is already accredited by National Construction Authority. This is where now you will be guaranteed in terms of quality of work. You will not have an issue of somebody doing a job that will be defective at the end of the day. The other regulatory aspect is basically a registration of projects. This is where once a project is conceived, everything is ready and it has received all the necessary statutory approvals from county to environmental agency or any other approval that is necessary for that particular project, depending on its uniqueness. You now, and you've identified a contractor, you now bring those documents. In fact, you don't bring, you apply online for your project to be registered as a developer. The responsibility of registration is for the developer or the project owner or the client. So you register, and the purpose of this registration is so that, one, we can be sure that you have identified a licensed contractor who must be already contracted by you. You must have identified a professional team that's going to work on that project. If it is a project that requires an architect, there must be a professional architect, there must be an engineer. If it requires an engineer, definitely. And also a quantity surveyor, depending on the nature of the project. Now, having identified all those professionals and you've also applied, gotten the necessary approvals for the project, you now push this into the NCA registration portal. We'll evaluate it, and if everything else is in order, we'll also carry out due diligence, and then we register that project and give you a compliance certificate. compliance certificate means that you've met all the necessary requirements for that project to take off. And of course, in addition to that, we carry out what we call quality assurance and compliance checks from time to time on ongoing construction works. And that's why sometimes when you walk around, you may see excess for projects which do not meet certain compliance requirements. And that X is very common for projects which do not meet those requirements. It does not mean the structure is going to collapse, but it means it has missed out something. And we go out there to check that from time to time. So in terms of regulatory, we do those three things: registration of contractors, accreditation of contracting workers and site supervisors, registration of projects, and carrying out quality assurance to ensure that things are happening the correct way out there. Capacity building is where now we train contractors who have been registered by NCA, and this is a mandatory requirement where, as NCA, we have to ensure that a contractor who is registered by us is taken or undertakes training which is rolled out annually. Here, in terms of how we roll it out, we've actually partnered with some of the service providers out there whom we work with in a collaboration to ensure that our contractors are trained. Of course, we also train construction workers, and before COVID, we were actually undertaking these trainings, but because with COVID it brought issues of we have to practice social distancing, we have to practice minimize crowding and all that and so on. So the trainings, actually, the physical trainings were suspended, but now we are working on a way of putting them online or offering them online. And once we are ready, we'll do that. Of course, if you allow me, I'll share more what we have been able to do to ensure that even contractors, because this is a mandatory requirement for a contractor to renew their license, which will start in the next month, 1st of June, what then will they be able to do now that we have suspended training, physical trainings? I will share that at the right time. So in terms of capacity building, there's training, but training only addresses manpower in terms of labor. But also the other aspects of capacity building, which looks at materials availability, looks at financing availability or affordability as far as financing is concerned, especially to the SMEs. It also looks at equipment and the market and so on and so forth. So capacity building is wide. Training is just one component. Lastly, I want to talk about advisory. And advisory, NCA has a function for research, which is in the Act or in the law. And this research is in areas that are related to construction industry. And through our research, and again, through the data we collect, remember we collect a lot of information. When we register a contractor, there's so much we collect in terms of their company details, projects they are doing, and so on and so forth. We also, when we register a project, we also collect a lot of information, the size of the project, the type of the project, the cost, the project value, and so on and so forth. With the research we do, plus the information we collect, this is quite some information that we analyze from time to time, and we are well placed to advise the industry in terms of any area they may want to know. And we also support in terms of anybody conducting research and may want to collect information from us. This information can always be made available as and when required and when we have it. So those are the three things we do as NCA, and we are spread across the country. Of course, we are headquartered in Nairobi, but we also in all areas of our country as far as our activities go. Why? Because if there was to be an issue anywhere in any part of the country, you don't expect somebody to launch the operation from the headquarters. It will take too long to reach there. So we have officers across the country to be able to undertake, especially quality assurance and other activities that require presence in an area. Safety is our priority. It does not matter what type of project somebody is undertaking. As long as that project will affect someone's life, then it needs to be guaranteed to be assured in terms of safety. So regardless of what kind of project somebody is willing to undertake, whether it's a project where it's just a house that you say, is this a single dwelling unit, as they may call it, or you want to do a multi-dwelling unit, as long as you're doing a project that at the end of the day will affect someone's life, then that project is important. So to answer your question, whether all projects must get necessary approvals, the answer is yes. The only difference is the level of skill of how to look at it, and level of detail. Even in terms of construction, there are some projects that you will look for a certain level of qualification to undertake, and others will look for another level of qualification, depending on the risks of that project, the function of that project, or that particular, what the output of the project will be, and so on and so forth. So all projects require to be given a compliance certificate after they have been, after the owner has applied for registration by NCA. But I also want to say it costs you nothing to apply for a compliance certificate from NCA. It costs you nothing to request for registration of a project. What it costs you is internet bandwidth, and reader device, and you need to scan all those documents and push them into the system, because everything is online. And then we'll evaluate. As long as you've applied, all we'll be checking is that you have attached the necessary documents. You've also selected the professionals that are going to work on that project, and each professional, like the architect, will have to confirm that yes, indeed, they are part of that project. They'll have to accept. We don't even know where they are, but they'll get an auto-generated mail. Once they accept, once the engineer accepts, once the contractor accepts, then we'll say that's the first stage. Then we'll carry out other evaluations, and once all is done, then we'll approve it, and then we'll give you a compliance certificate, free of charge, at no cost. So why do you have to fear? There's no need to fear for yourself, just to guarantee your safety. That is the aspect of how do you confirm that all the people you have engaged on your project as for professionals are authentic, or they are qualified to undertake what they have proposed to do. Number one, I want to say this. Every other professional actually has a regulator or a regulatory body that actually undertakes their professional registration. For contractors, I want to start by saying that we do license them here. And all the registered contractors are actually in the NCA website. So if you want to first of all confirm whether the contractor you want to engage in a project is registered, you will first of all go to the NCA website and check whether they have a valid license at the time of you engaging them. Number two, that particular contractor, when you're now, and that's the second level of assurance, when you're now wanting to start construction, it's required, this registration by law requires you that 30 days prior to commencement of construction works, you need to lodge a registration with NCA. When you lodge your registration with NCA, you'll be attaching a contract between you as the project proponent and the contractor. You'll also be indicating the names of the professionals that will undertake that project. What does that mean? When you push that to the NCA system and you've identified a contractor, if it's a contractor that's not licensed by us, if at the first stage you missed or to check the authenticity, it will be flagged by our end, because if it's a contractor that's not registered by us, definitely it will not pick, because the mails will only be sent to the contractor that's licensed, and also you've identified them and registered them. Now, that's for the contractor bit. For the professional, when you put them in the system, what NCA does, we have interlinked, we've collaborated with our sister regulators, EBK for engineers, and BORAX for architects and quantity surveyors. BORAX is a Board of Registration of Quantity Surveyors and Board of Registration of Architects and Quality Surveyors, and EBK is the Engineers Board of Kenya. Now, the professionals you pick are for them to go through, they are the ones that have been put in the database of those sister regulators, and that's the only time they can also get emails. When this thing was manual, you can imagine how it was. It would have been very chaotic. But because everything is online, the system is working so well. So that is an assurance to the developer that if you go through the NCA for registration for the project, it means the people you're having out there, definitely you will be having somebody who is acting as your guarantor that the people you have selected as professionals on the project are indeed registered, because they have gone through the system and they are picked from the databases of the specific regulators. So that's an assurance for you, and that's why you need to have your project registered. It happens, and this is why we also exist. And that's why the role of our function of quality assurance and compliance checks comes in. Remember, at registration, you may provide everything. On paper, things are looking good, but that's just on the table. On the ground, things may look different. So when we come to do quality assurance on an ongoing project or compliance check, one of the things we look out for is that we know who are parties to this project. We know who actually registered in this project as per NCA database. Because when you're coming, we already have the project. For a registered project, that's why I insist that people, project owners need to register. Because when you come, the first thing we'll be checking is the project registered? Yes. If it's registered, who are the parties to that project? Even sometimes, it's not just a question of the architect being different on the ground. Sometimes even contractors can be different on the ground. Even engineers can be different on the ground. Even the signboard is indicating that it's actually the architect that you registered, but the person on the ground is totally different. Now, how do you tell? There are many ways. Remember, the Act allows that we can actually put our investigation officers who are mandated to visit sites are actually mandated to ask any question pertaining to that project. And they can first of all ask to see the site records. One of the site records is the site instruction book. Remember, the person who gives the instruction must be doing unless you want to use a fake name to say that you are the one, that has to be now the person who is actually physical on the ground. That is able to bring out somebody who is actually not the real one who registered. And we're able to pick that out, and then when that's flagged out, then that site is non-compliant because the person on the ground is not the person that is registered, because the responsibility must be end-to-end. I think the onus and the responsibility of ensuring that we end up with safe structures is upon all of us. That is the beginning of where I want to state the point. And we must work collectively and responsibly. Now, from the person who is called the last mile, the person who touches or that is their hands to be able to ensure that a project is done, this is now the fundi. To the person who is going to celebrate at the end of the day that a project has been well done, we are all responsible. We are all liable. We have a role to play. So the best thing we can do, we do not have to wait for the regulator. Having done our work, even before we come to the ground, we just need to ensure that you're doing the right thing. Remember, if something goes wrong, the first loser is the investor of that project. Of course, everybody will have lost. Maybe the fundi will have lost opportunity for income. The contractor will have lost a contract. And the professionals also will have lost a job and so on and so forth. And if, God forbid, if it ends up in a structure collapsing, then some may even lose their lives. So to avoid all these risks of losing a life or losing a job or something, all of us then must act responsibly. The regulator is here to ensure that the right thing is done. But again, you don't have to wait for the regulator's eye all the time. All you can do, and it's a good question you've asked, that what else can be done? All you can do is that even if you think something is not being done correctly, then you can always report. And if you have various channels of reporting, you can either go to our website, you can do an email anonymously, or if you can also identify yourself, and so on and so forth. And whenever you receive those reports, either as a complaint, and then we take up the matter, and we deal with it accordingly. I know many things go into people's minds, especially when it comes to the issue of housing and their safety. And sometimes, buildings or property, as a property, change hands in terms of ownership. Even the occupiers, in terms of tenancy, keep changing hands. Today, a different tenant is here. And sometimes there is always a concern, whether am I living in a safe building or a safe structure, and so on and so forth. There are many ways of going around it. Let me start by saying what the government has done in the past in terms of when we used to have a lot of issues of buildings collapsing. Remember, there was, through our presidential directive, there was, I can say, a directive that was set up. This is National Building Inspectorate, and this was around 2015 when this building that collapsed in Umoja. And the reason was that there was a serious concern the same concerns you've raised in terms of are we really living in safe structures? And since that particular directorate was set, actually we've done a lot, and it's been working in terms of multi-agency approach, where NCA is part of, sitting is part of that multi-agency. We have the law enforcement agencies, we have the National Business Directorate itself as the secretary for that particular agency, and the chairmanship is there. And then we have other actors like the county government, we have environmental agency, we have the water, we have power, all of us in it, including even the disaster management team. Now, they have done quite a lot. They have covered enough ground. And one of the things they did first was to assess or audit buildings in Eastlands. And I'm sure you've heard about that report before, where quite a number of buildings audited were found not to be in good habitable condition. They're not safe. There were various categories. Some were found to be safe, a small percentage, I think 15%. The remaining 85 had various categories of safety. There were some which were needed total overhaul. Some were recommended that they need to, you know, it's like when you look at it, it needs not to exist. so that at least something else can be done. So to answer your question, there are very many ways of ascertaining safety of a structure or a building for that matter. There are many professionals out here who can actually undertake an audit, a safety audit in terms of the structure, in terms of the use, in terms of the functionality, to give you guarantee that this house or this building is safe to live in. For existing structures, which were built beyond someone's time, when you come and you are not sure, because even structures also deteriorate over time. 10 years earlier, it could also be serving its function very well. 10 years later, maybe something has happened. Maybe there was a serious natural occurrence that affected the safety of that building. So you need to look for an engineer to carry out an audit, structural audit for that. You also need to look for like an architect to also look at whether the space utilization and the surrounding development that has happened are still in tandem with the original intention of that building. You also need to look at other risk analysts to give you what it takes. But the most important thing, first of all, is to ensure that the structure is safe. And there are many ways of looking at it. Once that is done, then they may recommend certain things. They may say, it is okay, but it needs A, B, C, D to be done. Maybe the building is having some cracks that are not seriously putting it in danger, but can be retrofitted to bring back the life of the building or the building to its safety. All those can be done. So for the one I'm referring to about Eastlands, there are also other people or landlords that were advised that their building required some scientific audit that now deals with serious tests to check the quality of the materials. And then they were also advised that now, you see, they need to get an engineer or somebody who can advise on what alternative designs can be done to make it safe or something like that. So, of course, COVID-19 is the new world order, if I may call it so. And maybe 6 months down the line, nobody had envisaged such kind of a pandemic, and to the magnitude that is affecting the entire world. So if you look at existing contracts today, because I now want to narrow into construction, if you look at the arrangement of what's going on today, 6 months down the line, I don't think there's any contract that, even if they identified risks, this as a disease was indicated part of it. So it's found as here, and we have to deal with it. So you remember on our first case was reported around 13th of March, so it's now about 2 months or thereabout since the first case was reported. Again, it was declared a pandemic, and now it is here with us, and things must continue. So as construction industry, working very closely in collaboration with the ministry, our ministry is Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development and Public Works, we had to come up with something. And I also want to appreciate the input of the industry stakeholders, including AK and EBK, actually IK, and all the other stakeholders that participated into this without, because sometimes when you start mentioning names, you know, you have to now mention everyone. But there were quite a number that sat together, of course, through the respect to social distancing, through an online engagement, digital meeting, and made quite very good contributions. And that is what informed the basis of coming up with the management standards of construction sites during this COVID. This was to ensure that the vulnerable group, of course, which is the construction workers, they continue to work, because it's through this site. They call this their work site. They call this their factory, where they operate, so that they come every day and go back home at the end of the day. So we had to come up with something, but this something was not developed in a vacuum. It was developed in line with what the Ministry of Health guidelines are already given out there. So our role as industry leaders was to ensure that how do we break it down from the MOH guidelines, focusing onto the construction work site, because each work site, like a factory, is unique. So that's now what informed developing of this. And one of the things we said that is key, just in terms of summary, was to ensure that each site has got an health and safety officer or a person that is in charge of that site that will also be looking at issues of COVID guidelines, so that as they come to site, as the workers come to site, this is the person that ensures that enforcement of those guidelines are done. So we didn't run away from MOH guidelines. We just picked them and broke them down, because now this is, we know a site normally has a site health and site safety and health and safety officer, and that particular person is given additional role to enforce this particular one. The other one was just to ensure that each contractor, who is the site manager actually, basically, should ensure that they have that temperature sensor or temperature gun, that non-contact one, the one that you put close to your skin, and then it detects your body temperature. That was important because one of the key symptoms, of course, is high temperatures in someone's body if they are affected. Of course, there are also other symptoms, but that is main one. So that anybody found to be having high temperature should not be allowed to enter site. And that would be the work of health and safety officer on site to enforce. The other one was to ensure that contractors generally employ what we call administrative controls, so that those administrative controls will guarantee one, social distancing or reduction of density, and ensure that things like hand washing points are available, or sanitizers, and so on and so forth. And even to the extent that ensuring that whatever they're touching has already been decontaminated, if there's such a word, so that at least people don't get affected. The other thing that was key is that, of course, anybody, even within the time of work, if they exhibit any symptoms, they need to be isolated immediately so that they don't continue with work, and then they move to isolation center, and then the report is immediately done through the hotlines that are given, so that at least necessary action can be taken. We also indicated, we know whenever we go to check compliance on sites, we normally focus on health and safety as one of the items in addition to the rest. But one of the things we normally look at in terms of health and safety, in terms of the PPE is the personal protective equipment, apart from the helmets, the safety boots, the hand gloves, and so on and so forth, and the overalls, In addition, because of COVID, we have insisted that they must have masks on. I must say that now it actually is mandatory for people to wear masks as long as they are in public spaces. And you know, construction site is like a public space because you're many of you there coming from different areas. So in addition to that particular one, I'm now happy to report that even in terms of law, it has now been entrenched, and it is it's a mandatory requirement. So, and again, they should not be shared. You should not wear your face mask today. For the ones that are reusable, you make sure you make sure it's of good hygiene, and then no sharing. Then, of course, I've talked about hand cleaning facilities to be provided on site. We insist both, to have a frequency of hand washing as frequent as possible, maybe after touching a material, and then you think you're going to, you have to wash your hands. But with the mask on, again, the risk of contamination or getting infected is minimized, because remember, they say this thing is mostly contracted by touching the three organs, that is the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And if you cover your whatever, now your eye is the one that's exposed, so you need to keep washing your hand so that at least you don't contaminate your eye with the whatever. Then that means you have to ensure that the site, the hand cleaning is the frequency is higher. The other thing we talked about is the terms of payment. I know most of our construction workers, they get paid on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Sometimes the mode of payment is cash. Here, again, this guideline was insisting that let's move to digital payments. People should be asked to have at least a digital payment mode platform, either mobile money or using any of the service providers. And then whenever payment is being done, then the employer, who is the contractor, pays through mobile money, and so on and so forth. Then we also said that the toll-free number for COVID should also be displayed on site, and then if case there is any report to be done, then they have to use that number to make the reporting. Again, because we are just picking what was in the guideline and what the government has communicated from time to time and put here, we also indicated so that people comply with the government directive of restricted movement and the reduced time for working, they must leave the site by 4 o'clock so that at least they go home in good time, and also respect the curfew, which is 7 p.m. at night to 5 a.m. in the morning. So basically, that is a nutshell what we actually produced and shared with the especially contractors. Now, this particular document was developed and put in the NCA website. We also shared with our stakeholders so that it can be spread across. I know the challenge that has been asked before is how do we enforce it? And we have said that we have our operations going on. We have our team on the ground. Of course, they respect all the social distancing. They respect the minimum crowd in a car. And then whenever they go to site, those are some of the things that are currently checking whether contractors are complying with them from time to time. The construction industry, just like any other sector of the economy, is not the only one which has suffered this COVID-19 pandemic. First, the impact of COVID-19 on the industry has been to the extent that, one, there is now interrupted supply of construction materials, especially for materials that have to be procured from outside the country, or even materials that have to be obtained using means that are not safe. Two, there is also interrupted supply of labor. One, it's not just the quantity of laborers on site, that has been affected, but even the duration of work, time of work, and that has also affected productivity. So that if you are supposed to do a certain task of work within a certain time, it will now take longer. And that leads to delays, which is normally a key concern to any industry stakeholder. So that's how this COVID has affected. And we do not know how long it will be here with us. And you see, life has to continue. So moving forward, what we think is important is that to start looking at ways in which the industry can continue operating in a safer manner and proper management of COVID so that the risk of infection is either eliminated or minimized. That is the key. That the work still has to continue, but we have to put in place all these measures that will ensure that the risk of contracting the COVID-19 is totally minimized. That is the way that the industry will continue. So how we see the industry going forward, of course, there is an imminent impact where there will be reduced because the intended economic recession, there will be reduced activities in terms of work, because again, when there is a recession affecting other economies, construction industry will also be affected. And let me say this, you know, construction industry is normally the parameter for measuring the economy. You know, you have to eat, that's guaranteed. You have to have a shelter over you, that's guaranteed. You have to cover yourself with clothes, that's guaranteed. Having achieved all that, that's now when you can invest in construction. So if other things are affected, it means construction industry is also going to be affected. But all is not lost, because beyond COVID, life will have to continue. But how will it continue? A focus will have to be given in a way that as other economies are opening up, other areas of the economy are opening up, also construction industry will require a focus in terms of how do we ensure that the players there having something to keep them moving as the other sectors are opening up. There is something positive I see. Because people will still have to eat, food will have to be transported. So definitely there will be roads. So roads still have to be maintained. That's construction industry. Because people will be unaware, may fall sick and so on and so forth, they'll require hospitals and so on and so forth. That will require construction. And when that happens, it also comes with the other facilities like energy or power and supporting amenities and so on and so forth. So there's something positive as we look at it. So for us to achieve food security, transportation must happen, and construction is what will now ensure that that happens, because the road must be there. Irrigation, if it's to happen, construction must happen, because we must construct dams and irrigation channels and so on and so forth. So even agriculture, the area of agriculture will be supported by construction. So it will not be left so much behind as long as we look at other sectors. So we need to focus on sectors that will ensure that there is some construction to be done to have that particular objective achieved at the end of the day. First of all, let me say this is a good opportunity to interact with the industry. This is a good opportunity to share what we see from where we sit. And one of the things I want to, first of all, embrace and recognize is the fact that there is a program called Jeuna Mjengo, which I think is run by AK. For me, in terms of how we can touch communities, how we can reach the developers, especially the small-scale ones, this is a platform, in my view, can be very well used to ensure and sensitize, especially that category of developers, and even to the, by extent, other actors like construction workers and SME contractors, in a way that they get properly educated, they are informed of what they need, the do's and the don'ts, so that we live in a safe, sustainable environment that is not affecting our lives from time to time. We've heard of issues of where many a times structures that have been constructed somehow lose their balance and disappear into the ground, simply called collapsing. Those things cannot happen if we have our people properly sensitized. And I think the catchword of Je Unamjengo, in my view, is something that can be embraced, can be nurtured, and can be taken to the grassroots level. By the way, there is nobody without a mjengo. So the answer is always yes, but how do they do it? Because everybody has a house to live in. I do not know of anybody who does not live, whatever by the name they call it, but it's something they call a shelter at the end of the day, even if it's a veranda. But something's on top of them that if anything goes wrong, can easily fall on them. So Je Unamjengo is a theme that needs to be driven, needs to be taken to the next level. And I think with that, I want to appreciate AAK and the leadership for at least coming in such programs, because as an industry regulator, all I know is that to go far, we will have to work together because we want to go far. And working together will ensure that people see us as facilitators rather than barriers to getting safe development. Thank you very much.